Where legends breathe again. Eldmyth. In the beginning, before it was a relic, before it was a quest, before it was a word spoken in whispers around monastery walls and kingly fires, it was simply a vessel, a cup, as humble in form as clay in the hands of the forgotten potter. And yet, in the weaving of myth, the smallest vessel becomes an ocean, and the least object becomes the axis of the world. The Holy Grail does not arrive in history with a fanfare, nor does it enter the world through thunder or flame. It is not forged by gods wrestling in the sky. It is carried quietly, like breath in the dark, from hand to hand, from age to age, gathering meaning the way a river gathers silt until its waters run with memory. The oldest whispers of the Grail do not name it as such. In early echoes scattered across pre-Christian mythologies, there is always a sacred vessel. In the Celtic otherworld, cauldrons of rebirth bubble eternally under the watch of unseen queens. In Welsh legend, the cauldron of Annwn promises abundance, resurrection, and secret wisdom. Across the forests and cold coasts, druids lift cups to the moon, bewitched by the promise that certain liquids, mead, blood, sacred water, might open doors within the soul. These vessels grant either plenty or peril, depending on the purity of the hand that holds them. The vessel is always bound to a choice: life or death, revelation or madness, divine union or an empty echo. Long before the Grail was tied to Christ, it was bound to the earth. Fertility rites, sacrificial bowls, womb-shaped chalices buried beneath turning seasons. In prehistoric myths, the cup is a symbol of the Great Mother, the receiver of rain, semen, blood, and sacrament. It represents the hollow that gives birth to all fullness. The Grail, even in its pre-Grail form, is feminine and cosmic. It is the mystery that receives the sun, an echo of archaic cosmology where sky and earth perform an eternal marriage. As civilizations shift, so does the shape of the myth. In the Near East and Mediterranean worlds, the sacred cup appears in the rites of Isis, Dumuzi, and Inanna. The descent of the goddess into the underworld is followed by her rebirth, a cycle tied to ritual vessels. The Grail archetype is hidden in initiatory chalices held by hidden priestesses beneath temple floors. Even in the earliest Jewish traditions, the Passover cup becomes a divine threshold, a symbol of death passing over, a boundary between slavery and promised land. Yet the Grail in the form the world now knows emerges at the crossroads of history and transcendence, the Last Supper. The Gospels themselves offer only fragments. They speak of a cup passed between hands, a blessing, a transformation of wine into blood. "This is my blood of the covenant," Christ says. The vessel becomes momentarily silent, hidden in the shadows of narrative, untracked, unnamed. But in later centuries, imagination fills the silence. It was not any ordinary cup, the chroniclers insist. It was carved from emerald fallen from Lucifer's crown, or shaped by angels, or handed to Christ by Joseph of Arimathea, whose lineage is lost to common genealogy. It is Joseph who becomes the first guardian in the Grail mythos. In apocryphal lore, he uses the cup to catch the blood that spills from Christ's side as the soldier's spear pierces divine flesh. That moment, one of agony, sacrifice, cosmic rupture, fuses the vessel with eternity. Blood becomes sacrament. The Grail becomes more than a cup. It is now a memory of God's suffering, a reminder that heaven once bled into earth. Legends claim that Joseph then journeys westward, carrying the Grail across hostile lands, guided by visions rather than maps. Through Roman ruins, through forests thick with unknown spirits over mist-haunted seas. Each step away from Jerusalem is a step out of history and into myth. Eventually, he is said to reach Britannia, an island already soaked in magic, tied to old gods and whispering stones. There, the Grail finds new soil in which to root. Christianity meets Celtic mysticism. Blood meets moss, heaven meets the fog. Britain does not receive the Grail as a passive artifact. The land bends around it. Springs are said to rise where the Grail touches ground. Wounds in men and earth alike seal themselves where a drop of its power falls. The relic becomes a nexus point, a holy wound in the land through which eternity leaks into time. Fonts vitae, wells of life, begin to appear in legend, linked to a silent, unseen cup. But the Grail is not meant for common sight. It guards itself. It slips behind veils. Those unworthy feel its presence only as longing. Those who seek it for power are blinded. Its purpose is not conquest but transformation. It does not answer to kings or armies but to purity of heart and the strange geometry of fate. In medieval Europe, as Christianity tightens its hold and monasteries multiply under rising stone walls, word of the Grail spreads like a secret fire. Monks spread rumors through ink and prayer. It is said to radiate a light brighter than candles, to ring like a bell when danger approaches, to bring food to the faithful even when famine besieges the land. In the cloisters, beneath murals of saints and martyrs, students are taught that the Grail symbolizes divine grace, the unreachable perfection of God's will. But even the Church does not fully own it. The Grail belongs equally to the heretic, the poet, the dreamer. The first written narratives of the Grail appear in the 12th century. Chrétien de Troyes, a French poet, mentions it in his unfinished romance Percival, the story of the Grail. He does not give it a clear identity, only an image, a procession in a mysterious castle, a glowing object carried by a maiden emitting radiant light. He does not speak it as Christ's cup, but as something both miraculous and undefined, a blank symbol inviting interpretation. Just as myths live best in ambiguity, the Grail is born into literature half-formed, shimmering between worlds. Soon others expand the tale. Robert de Boron finally links the Grail explicitly to the Last Supper. Wolfram von Eschenbach in Parzival reimagines it not as a cup but as a luminous stone brought to earth by neutral angels when heaven and hell divided. In his vision, the Grail is the center of a secret brotherhood, the Templars of the Grail, who guard it in the hidden castle of Montsalvat. It becomes neither purely Christian nor pagan, but something older and vaster, beyond religion. The Grail is now the forever mystery, perhaps an angelic technology, perhaps the fallen heart of a star. Throughout all variations, one thread remains unchanged. The Grail demands inner purity. Percival fails at first because he does not ask the right question. It is not bravery that opens the mystery but compassion, not strength but awareness. The Grail is a mirror turned towards the soul. To find it, one must look inward so deeply that the boundaries between self and divine dissolve. And yet, despite its spiritual demands, it stays rooted in the physical imagination of humanity. It glows, it bleeds, it heals. It starves common sense and feeds longing. When crusaders march east, some believe they are also seeking the Grail, a rumor hidden in dusty deserts, buried beneath ruined temples. Some swear it rests beneath Solomon's temple. Others claim it was taken to Ethiopia, where it sleeps in a guarded sanctuary no outsider can enter. In truth, perhaps the Grail never wanted to be found. Perhaps its purpose was always pursuit, the burning, desperate longing that drives humanity toward something higher than itself. The Grail lives in the search. The pilgrims, the poets, the mad kings, and wounded knights, all are bound by the same whisper in the blood that says, "Beyond what you know, something waits that can make you whole." This is how the journey truly begins. Not with the gleam of metal, not with the weight of a cup in hand, but with a question echoing in the dark corridors of the human heart. And somewhere across forests and stone, beyond known maps, something answers back. If the Grail was born in Christ's final hours, then it is sustained by humanity's endless need for meaning. It does not rest. It moves through symbols. It rests in dream. It waits for the one who will finally see it not as a treasure, but as a truth that dissolves all wanting. And far away, across broken kingdoms and whispering centuries, the echo of its presence stirs another story, a door creaking open in a hidden castle, a wounded king waiting to be healed, a round table whose empty seat trembles, sensing destiny's approach. The empty seat at the round table was not merely a space unclaimed. It was an absence with weight, a silence that pressed against the ribs of every knight who gathered there. They called it the Siege Perilous, the perilous seat, a place no unworthy soul could occupy and live. Some said the earth beneath it had split for lesser men. Others whispered it was not the chair that judged, but the unseen presence bound to it. The Grail, though still distant, had already touched Camelot through that waiting place. Arthur, crowned by a sword that had risen from myth itself, understood that kingdoms are not built on conquest alone. They are built upon symbols, and no symbol burned brighter than the Grail, an unseen sun around which the greatest hopes of the realm orbited. The Round Table was more than a gathering of warriors. It was a living mandala, a sacred geometry where each knight represented a virtue: courage, justice, mercy, humility, faith. And the Grail was the unseen center, the still point around which all virtues sought equilibrium. In the hush before banquets, when goblets rang and banners stirred in the hearth's heat, some knights claimed they felt it: a tremor, a presence brushing against the threshold of reality, like wings folding in another realm. Whispers of the Grail did not touch every knight the same way. To some, it was an object of devotion. To others, a prize to be claimed. To a few, it became an obsession, gnawing quietly at the edges of the mind. But to three in particular, the Grail would etch a destiny deeper than sword lines in flesh: Galahad, Percival, and Bors. Galahad was said to be born not of ordinary flesh, but of a prophecy that had been slowly ripening through time. The son of Lancelot, himself the greatest of all knights, Galahad was raised in monasteries, among whispers of prayer and stone walls that echoed only psalms and silence. He knew little of battle in youth. Instead, he learned stillness. He learned how to keep his gaze inward while the world shouted outward. While others learned to strike, Galahad learned to listen. When he finally arrived at court, he did not announce himself. He walked in quietly, as if stepping into a memory half forgotten. The Siege Perilous recognized him instantly. The moment he sat, the hall did not erupt in cheers, it held its breath. The air trembled. Some claimed a brief radiance brushed the ceiling like pale dawn breaking through stone. It was then that the Grail quest began. Trumpets did not announce it. There was no formal decree. It began as a sense, a tremor beneath the feet of the world, and spread into certainty. The Grail was calling. Knights left their homes. Fathers abandoned sons. Brothers separated from brothers. The roads of Britain filled with solitary figures riding into forests where the sun often forgot how to shine. Percival rode with the weight of innocence on his shoulders. His mind was shaped by quiet hills, by prayers whispered to sky and stone. He did not seek glory. He did not seek greatness. He sought meaning, though he could not name it. The Grail, to him, was not a cup. It was an answer to a question he had not yet learned how to ask. Bors carried doubt like armor beneath his armor. Strong, loyal, tried in battle, he had also seen too much blood, too many burning villages. His quest was an attempt not just to find the Grail, but to be forgiven by a world he had helped fracture. Together and apart, they wandered through a land that seemed to shift around them, as if the landscape itself were part of the trial. Forests thickened impossibly. Rivers whispered warnings. Castles appeared at dusk, then vanished in the mist of dawn. Women veiled in white offered choices that could not be undone. Old men spoke riddles woven from grief and prophecy. Every test was invisible to the unawakened eye, but to those three, every step grew heavier with sacred consequence. And then, in remote chapels hidden where map lines fail, the Grail appeared, sometimes behind a veil, sometimes borne by silent hands, sometimes only as a glow pulsing behind stone walls. None touched it at first. To touch it without absolute readiness was to fracture the soul like glass struck by light. Galahad alone was permitted to behold it fully. In an ancient city lost to ordinary geography, sometimes named Corbenic, sometimes linked to no kingdom at all, the Grail was brought before him. It did not blaze like treasure. It did not blind like a sun. It glowed gently like the memory of love long past. Within the chalice swirled not wine, not blood, but the quiet essence of life itself, something too pure for definition. And when Galahad looked into it, He did not see power. He saw truth. He saw the world as it once was and as it could be again. He saw every kindness ever forgotten, every unspoken prayer carried on wind. He saw himself dissolve into light, not losing himself, but becoming part of something that had never been divided. In that moment, the Grail completed the cycle begun long before names were written in sand. Galahad did not return. It is said that after beholding the Grail, he asked only one thing: to be released from the world, not as a man fleeing it, but as a soul finally complete. According to legend, angels descended and carried him away, or perhaps he simply faded like mist touched by morning. What remained of him was not a body, but a peace that lingered in the stones long after. Percival and Bors, allowed only partial vision, returned changed. Not consecrated saints, not broken men, but vessels reshaped. They did not speak of what they witnessed. Words were too thin to hold it. Instead, they lived more gently. They forgave more easily. They looked into the eyes of the wounded as if seeing themselves. But Camelot, without its destined purity, began to wither. Without Galahad, the Grail became unreachable once more. The land slid slowly back into human frailty, jealousy, betrayal, ambition. Lancelot's love for Guinevere fractured the sacred geometry of the Round Table. Arthur's kingdom became a song already fading while still being sung. And the Grail. Once more it withdrew. Some say it ascended into an invisible realm called Saras, there to wait until humanity could bear it again. Others claim it was carried far beyond Britain, hidden in mountains where monasteries cling to clouds. And others whisper that it never left at all, that it retreated inward, into the collective dream of humanity, where all sacred things go when the world is no longer ready. Yet the mark it left could not be undone. In its wake, Europe was changed. Legends rippled outward, invisible orders formed. The Templars, according to some secret histories, were created not for gold, not for conquest, but to guard a lineage of Grail knowledge hidden beneath the stones of Jerusalem and the cathedrals of France. Gothic arches rose like frozen prayers reaching for unseen chalices in the sky. The Grail no longer needed to be seen. It had become an architectural presence, a hidden proportion in sacred design, a geometry of longing encoded into stone. Even artists and poets who had never held a sword felt its pull. Dante's celestial visions echo the Grail's promise of ascent. The alchemists saw the Grail in their vessels, their athanors, their attempt to turn base matter into gold, mirroring the transformation of soul into spirit. The Grail was now a metaphor for enlightenment, for the philosopher's stone, for the final union between mortal and eternal. It had escaped the boundaries of religion. It no longer belonged to Rome or Britain. It belonged to the seeker. And seekers have always walked the earth. Centuries passed, empires rose and fractured, names dissolved into dust, but in secret libraries, in monastery vaults, in coded manuscripts filled with star charts and forbidden diagrams, the Grail remained, not as a cup, but as knowledge dangerous to unready minds. Some began to wonder, was the Grail ever a physical object at all? Or had humanity misunderstood its nature from the beginning? Perhaps the chalice was always the mind, the blood always consciousness, the kingdom always internal. And yet, legends do not form around empty air. Something must have existed, something that cast the first and greatest silhouette. Hidden beneath wars, beneath plagues, beneath revolutions and renaissances, the Grail slept. But sleep is not death. In quiet places where forest meets ruin and stone meets star, the ancient vessel still listens. The world is once again shifting. Old truths are cracking. New questions rise into the sky, angled towards something unseen, eternal, waiting just beyond the veil. And somewhere a new seeker has begun to walk, unaware that each step echoes the path of kings, monks, prophets, and forgotten knights. The Grail, sensing the tremor of another turning age, begins to stir. The Grail's stirring is never violent. It does not shatter mountains or tear the sky in two. It is subtler, like a shift in the alignment of unseen currents. It enters the world the way dreams do, unnoticed at first, woven into the unconscious, seeding restlessness in the hearts of those most sensitive to its presence. Long after the Age of Knights had fallen silent and Camelot's name had faded into poetry, the world began to feel, once again, the ancient ache. In the shadowed centuries that followed the Grail's withdrawal, Europe redefined itself. Faith hardened into institution. Mystery was fenced in by doctrine. Yet behind cathedral walls and university chambers, secret traditions bloomed like nocturnal flowers. Hermeticism, Gnosticism, Kabbalah, Sufism each carried in different languages the same haunting theme, that somewhere a divine essence had been lost and somewhere it could yet be reclaimed. To the mystics, the Grail was no longer only an artifact. It was a state of being, a memory of wholeness within broken creation. Hidden orders began to form around this shared idea. Some called themselves protectors, others called themselves seekers. A few even dared to claim they were descendants of the original Grail guardians. The Knights Templar, whose historical existence is entangled with rumor, were long believed to have discovered something beneath the ruins of the Second Temple in Jerusalem. Official records claim old vaults and lost treasures. Unofficial whispers say knowledge dangerous, radiant, reality-altering. When their order was destroyed in the 14th century, the cause was said to be heresy, corruption, power. But in the undercurrent of history, another interpretation breathes, that they knew too much, that they had found or at least traced the Grail's true nature, and that knowledge made kings tremble. As they were burned, exiled, or stripped of name, something moved invisibly across the continent. Manuscripts vanished. Relics reappeared in unexpected places. A chalice traveled from hand to hand, hidden in monasteries that pretended ignorance. With the dawn of the Renaissance, the world turned its face once more toward hidden wisdom. Artists infused their works with impossible geometry, coded gestures, silent references to an invisible center. Da Vinci sketched chalices that perfectly mirrored human anatomy, as if the Grail were not separate from the body, but embedded in it, the heart itself, the womb of consciousness. Poets spoke of a hidden king sleeping beneath the earth. Alchemists spoke of a red cup that could awaken immortal perception. Philosophers carved the shape of a chalice into their metaphysical systems. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis, a trinity seeking to be held in a single vessel. Perhaps the Grail had not vanished. Perhaps it had multiplied. Around the same time, explorers set sail beyond the known world. Some of them carried more than maps or weapons, they carried myth. It was fixed in their minds that somewhere beyond the edge of known geography, the Grail might rest in purity, guarded by lands not yet corrupted by time. South America, Africa, the Himalayas each became a potential sanctuary in the imagination of those desperate enough to believe that transcendence could be found by foot and compass. Monks disappeared into eastern mountains. Sailors returned with strange stories of golden temples hidden beyond jungle walls. Indigenous legends, long ignored or crushed, began to intertwine with the older Grail myths, stories of sacred bowls that could summon rain, hearts that could be removed and restored, vessels that held the breath of gods. In every culture, the archetype echoed back. But there is a darker track through the Grail's cultural journey, one woven from obsession, corruption, hunger for control. As the world edged toward modern warfare and industrial power, whispers of the Grail reached dangerous ears. Rulers sought not illumination but dominance. They did not ask what the Grail could teach them, they asked what it could give them. Secret societies across the 18th and 19th centuries allegedly conducted rituals attempting to summon Grail energy into chosen individuals. Legends say there were experiments in blood, in consciousness, in symbolic rebirth. The Grail became mistaken for a key to immortality, eternal youth, ultimate authority, everything it was never meant to provide. It was in this moment of misunderstanding that the Grail retreated further inward, shielding itself beneath deeper layers of myth, madness, and metaphor. Like a star collapsing into itself to avoid destruction, it folded away from human tyranny. The 20th century did not weaken the Grail's aura, it amplified it. In a world torn apart by global war, where millions died under steel and fire, the old dream of a sacred relic that could heal the land became almost unbearable in its beauty. Writers, filmmakers, and composers resurrected the Grail myth again and again, hoping in art what could not be recovered in reality. Richard Wagner's Parsifal returned the Grail to the stage as a symbol of spiritual redemption through compassion. Later retellings blurred myth and history so completely that the Grail became part of the cultural bloodstream of modern humanity. It was every lost cause, every impossible hope, every whispered belief that something untainted must exist somewhere. Then came the world of psychology. Carl Jung, diving into archetypes and collective unconscious, would have recognized the Grail instantly. It was the self, the unified core, the wholeness each person forgets they carry. In Jung's framework, the Grail sits beside the shadow, the anima, the hero, the wise old man. It is the goal of individuation, the gold that is never material. Under this lens, the Grail story transforms entirely. Arthur is the ego. The knights are aspects of the psyche. The wasteland is inner fragmentation. The quest is self-discovery. And the Grail itself is the healed soul. Yet, even with all of this symbolic unraveling, a stubborn question remains unburied. What if the Grail was, and still is, an actual object? There are places on Earth that refuse clarification. Places where compasses stutter, where technology falters, where time seems to thicken. Montserrat in Spain, Rennes-le-Château in France, Glastonbury in England, Lake Tana in Ethiopia, the caves beneath Jerusalem, the depths of the Carpathians, all rumored as possible Grail resting sites. In each of these places, legends root into the soil so deeply that even skeptics fall silent. Something ancient lingers, something watchful. Pilgrims still travel there, not as armies, not as knights, but as broken, seeking humans carrying quiet prayers in their breath. It is said that the Grail's location cannot be found by desire, only by readiness. Coordinates mean nothing. Only inner alignment opens the path. And for most of the modern world, alignment is a forgotten language. But occasionally, every generation or two, a person is born whose life bends toward a mystery larger than themselves. Someone who is not chasing glory or knowledge, but meaning. Someone whose footsteps echo across old paths without knowing why. Dreams begin to shape their nights, a cup filled with stars, a woman in white walking into forest shadow, a stone door humming with light. These are not just dreams, they are memories waking up. Across the world, 3 such souls have begun to stir, not destined by prophecy but by resonance. They do not know one another, they may never meet, but the Grail is alive in their subconscious, and when one begins to move, the others feel unrest. The world, sensitive again after centuries of numbness, shifts slightly in response. The walls between worlds thin ever so subtly. Old guardians who have slept in hidden bloodlines raise their eyes. Hidden texts begin to reveal themselves to wandering hands, and something ancient within the earth turns, as if awakening from a long, dreamless slumber. The age of kings is gone. The age of knights is dust. But the age of the seeker has returned. And now the Grail, long silent, long hidden, must decide what it will be in this new world. A revelation or a reckoning. The modern world, wired with signals and blinded by noise, has learned to ignore whispers. Yet the Grail does not speak in language meant for crowded minds. It vibrates through coincidence, through the strange alignment of chance and memory, through that sudden certainty that a stranger has been seen before in a dream that never truly happened. While cities blaze with artificial light, the true current of the Grail flows beneath the surface, threading quietly through the overlooked and the unseen. One of the seekers lives in a city that never sleeps. Surrounded by glass, steel, and constant data, they spend their days drowning in information, and their nights starved for meaning. They do not know the name Grail in any sacred way. To them it is only a myth from forgotten stories. And yet, every time they pass a certain old fountain in a hidden courtyard, they feel the unmistakable sensation of recognition, as if some invisible hand has brushed their spine. The water in that fountain never freezes in winter, never warms in summer. It simply is, constant, waiting. Another seeker walks far from towers and networks, in a land where forests overtake forgotten roads. They feel drawn to places that never appear on maps, collapsed churches, abandoned villages, hills that bear ancient scars. Once climbing through twisted roots at dusk, they discovered a stone indentation in the form of a chalice, worn smooth by time, half swallowed by earth. When their fingers touched it, the forest fell a silent second too deep, as if time itself had paused to witness recognition. An old thought stirred without explanation. I have been here before. The third seeker lives near water. The sea has always murmured their name in a language they do not consciously understand. Dreams fill their sleep of submerged sanctuaries, of bell towers ringing beneath waves, of a vessel resting on a throne of coral. Once, diving beyond safe depth, they saw for an instant a pale shape glowing in the dark water, not fish, not stone, and felt no fear, only unbearable calm. 3 lives, 3 worlds bound by an unseen geometry older than memory. And around them, subtle guardians begin to stir. Not knights in armor, not cloistered monks, but ordinary people carrying extraordinary inheritances in diluted form. An archivist who refuses to destroy a certain manuscript. A librarian who accidentally leaves a forbidden book on the right table at the right time. A watchmaker who builds mechanisms that align only with specific dates. A musician whose compositions echo forgotten temple harmonies. They do not know their roles, yet history has placed the pattern inside their choices. As the seekers move through their lives, fragments emerge, symbols recurring in dreams, the same word overheard in languages they do not speak, a chalice shape forming again and again in reflections, windows, pools, shadows, architecture. At first it is nothing more than coincidence, but coincidence, repeated enough, becomes invitation. The first seeker finally searches the word Grail late at night, driven by an impulse they cannot resist. They fall into forgotten texts, disputed theories, forbidden speculation. They read of knights, lands that vanish, and a castle that never existed anywhere on any map. Something deeper than logic grips them. Not excitement, recognition. As if reading their own story written centuries before their birth. At the same moment in another part of the world, the second seeker dreams of a ruined round table overgrown with ivy. One seat glows. A voice they cannot identify whispers. Only what is empty can be filled. The third, waking at midnight, finds seawater gathered inexplicably on their windowsill, a single drop, placed with impossible precision. Within it reflects not their face, but a cup of light suspended over dark waves. It is then that the guardians, whoever or whatever they truly are, know the time has come to intervene. Across the world, letters are delivered without postage stamps. Messages appear in handwritten script that no living sender admits to having written. Each invite is the same, though delivered differently. You are closer than you think. If you wish to know what you have always known, follow the path shown at the next full moon. No explanation, no signature, and despite every instinct of modern self-preservation, all 3 obey. The paths lead not to the same location, but to aligned ones, sacred points arranged like a triangle across the world's hidden geometry. Stone circles, mountaintop shrines, forgotten subterranean chambers. Each is old. Each is marked by a quiet pulse, barely visible but unmistakably present when one stands at the center. The first seeker reaches an underground chapel beneath the city. Once a forgotten sanctuary, now sealed off from the world, its walls are carved with symbols that predate language. At its center stands a stone pedestal, empty, yet powerful. When the seeker steps closer, a hum passes into their bones. The second arrives at the heart of a forest, guided by nothing but instinct. There they find an ancient circle of standing stones, each etched with faded carvings. At the center, a natural hollow, shaped impossibly like a cup. Moonlight gathers within it, although the sky is clouded. The third stands on a cliff facing a restless sea. Beneath the surface, shapes move in graceful silence. They feel the pull downward, not to drown but to descend. And though no visible entrance appears, the water before them parts slightly, as if expecting them. At the same time, something else awakens. Beneath forgotten mountains, under ruined sanctuaries, within vaults long sealed by stone and oath, ancient guardians stir to consciousness. They are not immortal. They are not human in the way humanity now understands itself. They exist between matter and intention, watchers born from vows taken by souls centuries old. They have waited in silence, suspended in ritual sleep, until the Grail moved again. And they feel it now. The chalice has accepted the stirring of new vessels. But the Grail is conflicted. For centuries, it has been no thing and everywhere. It has been an idea, a symbol, a dream. If it allows itself to manifest again truly, physically, unmistakably, the world will change. And not all change is salvation. Hidden forces, shadowed and ambitious, are not blind to the energy trembling through the world. Secret organizations, unnamed and unacknowledged, have been watching similar patterns in data, in myth, in unexplained signals from deep space arrays and quantum instruments. They do not name it Grail, but they know the anomaly, a convergence event, a spike of impossible coherence spreading across three precisely aligned points. Their concern is not spiritual. It is strategic. And so a second pursuit begins, not of reverence but control. The seekers are no longer walking alone. Invisible eyes are turning toward them. And the Grail, sensing both devotion and distortion, does the only thing it has ever done when humanity steps too close with impure intent. It sets trials. Reality bends slightly, like glass warming. Memories surface that do not belong to this lifetime. Lifetimes where these three once stood as single beings in many forms: monk, warrior, healer, guardian, always circling the same unspeaking promise. Their souls are fragments of an old order reborn into a new age. Each trial is internal, yet experiences manifest through the world around them. The city seeker is tested by illusion, offered fame, recognition, and power if they abandon the unseen path. The forest seeker is tested by fear. Visions of loss, isolation, and madness whisper that turning back would be safer. The water seeker is tested by surrender, asked to step beyond into darkness without certainty of return. What none of them yet understand is that the Grail is not a reward. It is an awakening that erases who they think they are. As the moon reaches its peak, as oceans still their breath for one infinite moment, the three aligned sanctuaries hum with the same ancient language. For the first time in centuries, the Grail prepares a partial return, not as a physical cup, but as a presence, a silence thick enough to tear time open. In the underground chamber, the pedestal glows faintly and a circle of light forms above it. In the forest, moonlight gathers into liquid radiance inside the carved hollow. At the cliff, the parted waters reveal a submerged stairway spiraling into golden depths. And across the world, sensitive souls feel it without knowing why. A sudden clarity, a tightening in the chest, a moment of spiritual vertigo followed by inexplicable tears. The Grail is not returning quietly. Something is answering something else. The earth remembers. The stars pay attention. And the world, balanced upon its fragile edge between destruction and transcendence, waits to see what kind of hands will receive the next echo of the holy vessel. The silence deepens, not the simple absence of sound, but a thick, watchful stillness, the kind that presses against the mind and stretches seconds until they feel like centuries. Each seeker feels it at the same moment. In the underground chamber, the city seeker watches dust hang perfectly motionless in the air. The glow above the pedestal has stopped pulsing. It now burns steady, a soft, impossible white tinged with gold. Their heartbeat slows to match an unheard rhythm, and in that quiet, a thought arrives that is not a thought at all. You were never meant to find me. You were meant to remember me. The words do not echo, they simply exist. The seeker steps forward. As their foot crosses into the circle of light, the walls around them fade, replaced by visions layered one over another, a barren desert filled with kneeling figures, an ancient temple dissolving into fire, a child offering water to an unseen presence, a battlefield where the dying whisper a single luminous word: Grail. None of it feels like history. It feels like memory. In the forest, the second seeker kneels before the moonlit hollow. The liquid light gathered inside it ripples without wind, as though breathing. When they reach out, the glow coils around their wrist like a living thing, not warm, not cold, but absolute. The trees begin to lean inward. Roots shift beneath the soil. The forest is not observing. It is listening. A presence rises from below the ground, an echo of something that once guarded this place. It takes no shape, no form, yet the seeker feels its ancient awareness brush against their thoughts. Why have you returned? It seems to ask, and without knowing the origins of the answer, they whisper aloud, because you have been alone too long. The forest trembles not in fear, but in recognition, deep, ancient recognition. On the cliff's edge, the third seeker steps down into the spiraled stair that appeared beneath the parted sea. Water curves around them, held back by an unseen will. Above, the moon watches like a single, opened eye. With every step, the surface world becomes fainter. Light becomes denser. Time seems folded, layered into itself. The deeper they descend, the more familiar the destination feels. At the base of the stairs is a door made of no known material, transparent and star-filled at once. There is no handle, no lock, just a single indentation at its center shaped like the curve of a chalice. The seeker touches it with trembling fingers, and the door opens not outward but inward into them. The ocean vanishes, the world vanishes, and for one impossible instant they feel what it is to be everything. Across the globe, instruments in secret facilities spike into chaos. Readings go off scale, frequencies collapse into perfect alignment. Screens fill with overlapping geometries, circles within triangles, spirals within squares, all converging on one impossibility, a chalice, but the shape is wrong. It cannot exist in 3 dimensions alone. It's not forming an object, one voice whispers in terror. It's forming a state. They shut down systems, fearing overload. Yet even as the screens go dark, the image burns into their retinas, into their minds. They have just witnessed the threshold of something that does not belong to measurement, and now it knows it has been seen. Back in the hidden places, the trials reach their climax. The city seeker's vision sharpens to a single figure themselves, seated on a throne of light, crowned, adored by unseen masses. The illusion is seductive. Power, purpose, certainty. All you must do, the illusion murmurs, is claim what has always been yours. But in the reflection of the imagined crown, the seeker sees not themselves, but the suffering that would follow: control, division, devotion twisted into obedience. In a moment of painful clarity, they answer, nothing should belong to one. The throne shatters, the crown dissolves, the light remains. The forest seeker finds the ground cracking at their feet. Visions show them wandering forever forgotten, a mad relic clinging to ancient myths. Friends gone, family gone, no one to witness them again. Return, fear hisses. Forget this, be normal, be safe. Tears fall, but the seeker presses their palm deeper into the glowing hollow. If truth costs me the world, they whisper, then the world was never truly mine. The shadows retreat. The trees straighten. Moonlight brightens. The water seeker is shown nothing at all. No visions, no promises, no warnings, just endless dark and endless silence. The final and most cruel test, to continue without reason, without reward, without reassurance. And in that darkness, they choose to take one more step anyway. That is when the light explodes. Across all 3 sacred sites at the exact same moment, a tone resonates too low to be heard, too pure to be measured. It vibrates inside bone, inside memory, inside time. A linking. A remembering. The 3 are no longer only themselves. Their consciousness touches, threads bind, not as individuals but as parts of a forgotten whole. They see one another for the first time without eyes, a mind of stone and stars, a heart of roots and moonlight, a soul of sea and silence. Three expressions of one ancient vow reunited across distance, across time, across illusion. And between them, hovering beyond form, beyond language, is the Grail. Not a cup, not an object, but a truth made visible, a vessel never intended to hold liquid, only awakening. You are not here to possess me, the presence speaks, now clearly, now fully. You are here to become what can contain me. The world outside begins to respond. Old temples hum. Certain mountains tremble. Hidden springs turn warm. Children in far-off lands wake from identical dreams of golden light pouring into their chests. A shift has begun that cannot be unbegun. And far away in the silent heart of a sealed vault, something long dormant cracks open its eyes for the first time in centuries and whispers a single word into the dark. They have found it. The story has crossed its point of no return. Now the only remaining question is not who will find the Grail, but what the Grail will choose to make of them. The light did not fade. It multiplied. Across the three sites, the Grail's presence expanded, subtle at first, then insistently, folding the air and reality around it like a ripple through water. The three seekers, each isolated by geography, culture, and circumstance, felt themselves drawn into a single shared perception. Space between continents collapsed. Mountains, forests, oceans, and cities became a backdrop to a dimension simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. The city seeker saw streets dissolve into patterns of light, windows reflecting shapes that were not there before. Buildings rearranged themselves in silent choreography, as if architecture had learned to whisper secrets of the past. Every reflection, every shadow, every discarded scrap of metal became imbued with purpose. A realization dawned. The world itself was a vessel, and the Grail's presence was its resonance. In the forest, the second seeker felt the trees stretch skyward, roots entwining beneath the ground to form invisible runes. Leaves shimmered with patterns reminiscent of ancient carvings, glyphs older than kingdoms or kings. Birds perched on branches that were impossibly long, their songs harmonizing into an ethereal chorus. The forest seemed to hum, a low, sonorous vibration not heard by the ear but felt in the bones. As they stepped through the undergrowth, the seeker realized that the world was teaching itself. Every movement, every gesture, every sound was aligned to a hidden geometry, and the Grail was its axis. The water seeker descended deeper into the ocean stair. Waves around the cliff calmed as if obeying the presence, and bioluminescent creatures emerged, their bodies tracing spirals and circles that seemed more than natural patterns, symbols encoded into living light. At the base, the chalice-shaped door pulsed in response to their heartbeat. When the seeker touched the glowing indentation, the water rippled outward in concentric rings that reached across oceans, subtly shifting tides. The sensation was beyond comprehension. The Grail was not just awakening in them, it was awakening in the world. Yet awakening always invites challenge. The Grail's presence stirred those attuned not to reverence but to dominion. Organizations long dormant, shadowed by secrecy and ambition, sensed the convergence. They were not mythic knights, nor scholars, nor seekers. They were predators calibrated to the faint pulse of power, ready to manipulate, capture, or weaponize it. In a high-security facility, researchers noticed impossible energy readings converging on the three distant sites. Their alarms were futile, systems failed, signals warped, compasses spun. And then, without warning, one researcher whispered, "It's alive." The words carried a mixture of awe and terror. The first confrontation was subtle. Shadows moved in the city, undetected by normal eyes. Streets twisted in ways that protected the seekers or led them to tests designed by the Grail itself. Each seeker faced a reflection of their deepest desire, for control, for safety, for certainty. Only by rejecting these illusions could they progress. In a hidden alley, the city seeker saw a vision of the Grail perched on a pedestal of gold, the world kneeling at their feet. The temptation was irresistible. Yet, recalling the lessons of past trials, they stepped forward without claiming dominion, allowing the light to pass through them instead. The city shimmered, reality correcting itself around the act of humility. The forest seeker's trial mirrored this. A specter appeared, offering a return to normal life, safety, comfort, and the erasure of burden. Trees swayed, whispering promises that the Grail itself would vanish if they accepted, but they pressed their hand into the glowing hollow. And as they did, the forest itself breathed, a wave of energy rippling outward, reconnecting with hidden sanctuaries, rivers, and hills across the world. The Grail's influence expanded without destroying, teaching without speaking. The water seeker faced the deepest test. To fully merge with the Grail, they had to step beyond the physical, surrendering their body to the flow of consciousness, trusting it to carry them without knowledge of what lay ahead. The moment they stepped, the surrounding water transformed into light, folding over and around them, lifting them into a space beyond depth and distance. They felt a unity with earth, ocean, sky, and the other seekers. The Grail's essence was neither contained nor possessible. It was relational, alive in the connections it forged. The three seekers, now aligned, experienced something extraordinary. They did not need to speak. Thoughts, emotions, memories, and purpose intertwined. They glimpsed echoes of Galahad, Percival, and Bors, fragments of old vows, courage, and purity. The Grail did not require them to replicate the past. It asked them to embody the same principles in a world unrecognizable to Arthur's knights. And as the connection deepened, a new vision emerged. The Grail's true purpose in this era: not to be possessed, not to grant power, but to awaken humanity to a capacity they had long forgotten, for wonder, for responsibility, for communion with the unseen. The world outside began to respond. Springs warmed, winds shifted, children awoke from dreams of golden chalices, of rivers glowing with light, hidden temples stirred, ruins vibrated with ancient memory. The Grail's partial awakening was not just personal, it was planetary. It was subtle yet undeniable. A ripple had begun, the first in centuries capable of bending reality without violence. And yet the Grail's trials were not over. The Guardians, watchers suspended between form and thought for centuries, had begun to move. Their presence was silent, inevitable, and perfectly calibrated. The Grail's will, combined with their vigilance, was preparing the ultimate convergence, the final test for the Seekers. It would decide not only whether they could fully contain the Grail's essence, but whether humanity itself was ready to witness its return. The three Seekers stood in different worlds, connected by light and consciousness. Time had stretched and folded around them, but now the pulse slowed, steadying like a heartbeat. The Grail, no longer a cup, no longer a myth, hovered between perception and reality. It was a presence so vast that it filled spaces that had never been meant to contain anything. It did not speak. It did not demand. It merely existed. And in its existence was the purest truth. That divinity is not an object but a resonance, a call that reaches into every mind and waits to be answered. The city seeker felt the pulse in the air, bending the light around them. The streets reflected not buildings but constellations. Sidewalks curved into impossible geometries, and windows glowed with a silent language. They realized that human cities were not separate from nature, not separate from the sacred, but part of the Grail's hidden architecture, patterns waiting to be remembered. The forest seeker walked through the trees as though the entire woodland were alive, breathing in sync with the Grail's pulse. Every leaf, every branch, every root resonated with subtle, harmonic light. The forest whispered of old vows, forgotten guardians, and the lineage of seekers who had come before. They understood that the Grail's purpose was not isolation. It was communion, not possession. It was participation, the awakening of perception, morality, and awareness. The water seeker ascended from the depths. The ocean rippled in gentle waves of light, each pulse carrying echoes of forgotten civilizations, submerged temples, and ancient prayers. When they broke the surface, it was not water they emerged into, but a light that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 lifetimes. The Grail's presence enveloped them, and they understood that surrender had been the final key. Only by releasing the self, by letting go of fear, ambition, and expectation, could the vessel be complete. The three minds, now aligned, glimpsed the totality of the Grail's pattern. Across history, its essence had moved through symbols, through architecture, through myth and ritual, guiding humanity without overt interference. It had inspired kings, monks, warriors, and visionaries, all seekers in their own right. Now in their unity, the seekers became conduits, a living manifestation of the Grail's will. Their consciousness intertwined across continents, and for a moment, the world itself seemed suspended between chaos and harmony. And yet the Grail's trials were not complete. A final challenge emerged, not external but internal, the question of choice. What would they do with the awakening? Could they bear the weight of seeing beyond illusion, beyond ego, beyond ordinary human limitation? Each faced their reflection in a mirror of infinite depth. The city seeker saw power and control, tempting them with dominance. The forest seeker saw safety and comfort, offering an escape from responsibility. The water seeker saw nothing but void, asking them to leap into uncertainty without any promise. And each, without hesitation, answered the same way: not for me, for all. In that answer, the Grail's essence solidified, radiating outward in waves that touched hidden sanctuaries, restored lost rivers, rebalanced mountains, and even whispered to children dreaming unknowable dreams. From distant shadows, the Watchers, ancient guardians suspended between time and form, emerged fully. They observed not to control but to acknowledge. The Grail had chosen its vessels. The Seekers had proven themselves worthy not by conquest, not by strength, but by fidelity to the principles the Grail embodied: humility, courage, selflessness, and compassion. And in that acknowledgement, the Grail transcended its previous constraints. It became everywhere it had ever been: in stone circles, in Gothic cathedrals, in whispered prayers, in the laughter of children, in dreams and visions across centuries. It was no longer hidden. It was not merely seen. It was remembered. The world shifted subtly, imperceptibly at first. Those attuned to wonder felt a resonance, a sudden clarity, a tightening in the chest, an awareness that something vast and eternal had re-entered their reality. The Grail had returned not as an object of pursuit, but as an awakening in consciousness itself. And the three seekers, now fully integrated into this resonance, understood a final truth. The Grail had never been about possession. It had always been about becoming a vessel of light, a guardian of awakening, a living conduit for the sacred. The Grail's story, long whispered through myth, prophecy, and legend, had reached its modern culmination. Yet it did not vanish. It became the pulse behind life, the hidden architecture of perception, the silent teacher guiding those who dared to listen. Its presence is eternal, waiting in every shadow, in every stream, in every heart capable of wonder. The seekers, forever changed, dispersed back into the world. They carried no crown, no throne, no chalice. They carried understanding. And in their lives, the Grail continues to move, shaping the unseen, touching the hidden, awakening those prepared to perceive. The Holy Grail is no longer lost. It never truly was. It simply waits for the next seeker. Another legend fades, but the next awaits. Like this video, subscribe and continue the journey through myths.